Hello and welcome to my talk. My name is Marta Szreder and I work at the United Arab Emirates University. In this talk, I would like to tell you about our research into the variability of Affricates in Emirati Arabic, which we have conducted at the UAEU Phonetics Lab together with Derrick and Chahla Ben Ammar. I will start by giving you a short overview of the status of Affricates in Arabic in general and in Emirati Arabic in particular. Then I will discuss previous research into the determinants of the variability of these sounds. And in the main part of the talk, I will cover the three studies we have run, a corpus study and two elicitation studies, one using ultrasound. I will present our objectives, our methods, and finally our results. I will finish by summarizing our conclusions about Affricates in Emirati Arabic, as well as directions for further research. Affricates are not used in all dialects of Arabic, but where they are present, they come from the Old Arabic velar stops. This is part of the larger pattern of dorsal stop variation, which affects velar and uvular stops. And in the table, you can see how the three dorsal stops pattern in selected dialects of Arabic. While all dialects maintain a three-way distinction, the stops have different realizations, and it's clear that they are particularly variable in the subvarieties of Gulf Arabic, and they include alveolar and post-alveolar, voiced and voiceless affricates. The Emirati Arabic dialect is one of the Gulf varieties where the Old Arabic contrast between voiceless uvular and voiced velar stops has been replaced by a velar post-alveolar one. So, in other words, the Old Arabic g is realized as j by default. However, it often undergoes the process of optional lenition into y, so that, for example, jebel can be realized as yebel. In addition, in some speakers, the affricate appears to vary with the fricative j. On the other hand, the affrication of k into ch is only obligatory in the second person feminine singular suffix, which is a characteristic feature of the dialect. However, it also occurs in word stems where it remains an optional process, so that, for example, sakin can also be realized as sachin. And again, as with j, it tends to vary with the fricative sh in some speakers. And so the variation of Emirati affricates that I will talk about is only the one observed in word stems, and it is due to two distinct processes, affrication and lenition. Previous accounts of affricate variation in different dialects of Gulf Arabic have mostly focused on social and lexical factors. In general, these accounts typically report that both affrication and lenition are more common in older, less educated, and male speakers, and that both do not affect loanwords. There have been fewer attempts to link the processes to phonological factors, although it has been reported that affrication in particular is facilitated by the presence of the vowel E and conversely blocked by the presence of back vowels. More recently, studies into Qatari Arabic and Haili Arabic have suggested that both processes are also constrained by the obligatory contour principle. This is supposed to prevent the co-occurrence of homorganic consonants. And so according to these accounts, affricates are not allowed in the presence of coronal plosives and sibilants, and the two processes are meant to guide that. We set out to investigate if affricates behave in the same way in Emirati Arabic as in other dialects. So far, there have been no experimental investigations of Emirati Arabic, and as we know, literary studies may not accurately represent the variability observed in casual spoken language. Based on previous accounts, we wanted to establish to what extent the observed variability can be attributed to the social, lexical, and phonological factors. So we wanted to know if the variants are stable across speakers or words, and we also wanted to see whether we can find an effect of vowels and homorganic consonants on the two processes. Finally, we were interested in whether the different Affricate variants are stable within speakers and related to a consistent categorical difference in articulation. We used different methods to address our research questions. First, we conducted a corpus study, which provides a large amount of data but does not include speaker information. So we used this data to look at word effects and vowel effects. Since there wasn't enough data on the effects of coronal consonants in the corpus, we set up an elicitation study specifically to investigate the potential role of the obligatory contour principle as previously suggested for other dialects. And finally, we ran another elicitation experiment where we also collected ultrasound data to look at individual speaker variability both in terms of word and articulatory patterns. Our corpus study included data from two corpora, EMAC, which is based on spoken language retrieved from media, and the smaller child language acquisition corpus, which includes the speech of experimenters. We selected 45 words with the target Affricate segments based on previous studies. And this table shows you all of the words that we searched the corpora for. The words marked with an asterisk are the loan words. It's important to note that we analyzed all tokens separately to control for vowel variability. In other words, due to the high variability of vowels in Arabic, the same word may have different syllable structure and vowel quality in different tokens, as is clear from the examples in the table below, which shows all different tokens of one word. So by doing this, by considering all tokens separately, we were hoping to capture the pattern of co-occurrence of affricates with different vowels, regardless of word identity. The first finding was that there was a general preference for the unaffricated variants in both cases. So almost 70% of target words with the velar stop remained unaffricated, and almost 80% of target words with j underwent lenition into y. As far as the effects of vowels are concerned, in agreement with previous studies, the back vowel u always inhibited affrication. There were no tokens with the voiceless affricate in contiguity with u. Interestingly, the reverse was true of the voiced affricate. Despite the strong overall preference for the y variant, lenition did not apply in over 60% of cases with the back vowel present. In contrast, the front vowel E did not appear to have any facilitatory effect on affrication, contrary to previous studies. The affricate variant was stable across the front and central vowels. However, the vowel E did appear to pattern with lenition, so that the voiced affricate was replaced with the glide in almost all cases where the vowel E was present. Our next question was related to word stability. We set out to see whether affricate variation was mostly limited to variation across word types. The graphs show the proportion of different variants in all non-borrowings with over 10 tokens. As you can see, only 30% of these words always occurred with the same one variant. The remaining 70% of word types exhibited a continuum of variability with various proportion of tokens appearing with each variant. In the case of borrowings, they mostly confirmed the prediction based on previous studies and remained almost entirely stable in the predicted direction, that is, realized with the stop k or the affricate j. However, the word cup was an exception, as it was not expected to undergo lenition, and yet it did in all 25 tokens. To sum up the results of the Corpus study, we found that both affrication and lenition were inhibited by back vowels, as expected, but that the front vowel E only patterned consistently with lenition and not with affrication, as suggested by previous studies. We confirmed that loanwords were typically not affected, although with one exception, suggesting that the loanword status is not permanent in this regard. Other word types exhibited a fair amount of within-type variability. In general, these results suggest that certain word types and certain vowels tend to pattern with particular variants, but these effects do not have strong predictive power. Next, we conducted an elicitation experiment designed to test the role of homorganic consonants in Affricate variability. We recruited 20 female participants and we asked them to name 20 pictures illustrating words containing the target segments. The training was conducted in English, so the participants never heard the pronunciation modeled, and each participant saw each word 10 times. So in total, we had approximately 200 tokens for each stimulus, excluding the 3 instances where the participants used a synonym. Our goal was to investigate the potential effects of the obligatory contour principle, previously proposed to constrain both affrication and lenition in Qatari and Haili Arabic. Specifically, these accounts propose that the affricate variants are blocked from co-occurring from homorganic segments in close proximity. To test this, we selected words for each target segment with the alveolar stop or post-alveolar fricative neighboring with the affricate. And in addition, we also found more words with other coronal consonants which were not expected to have the same effect, or where the homorganic segment was farther removed from the target segment. This graph shows the proportion of affricated tokens for the words with the voiceless affricate, with a neighboring homorganic segment on the left and without it on the right. It is clear that there is practically no difference between the two conditions. If anything, the participants are actually producing more affricates in both conditions than we found in the Corpus study, contrary to our predictions. This effect holds when we compare all the tested words individually. There are no large differences across word types. If anything, some of the words we expected to affricate more tended to occur with the stop. However, the results are quite different for the voiced affricate. Here, the words in the homorganic neighbor condition, the ones on the left, were de-affricated to y in over 90% of cases, as predicted, whereas the other group of words had an even proportion of unaffricated and affricated variant. However, this difference appeared to be due to 2 particularly stable words, which always occurred with the affricate. In sum, we did not find strong evidence for a constraint against affrication in the presence of homorganic segments for either the voiceless or the voiced affricate in Emirati Arabic. Where differences were observable, they appeared mostly to be due to lexical effect. In the second experiment, we set out to investigate to what extent the affricate variability is due to across and within speaker factors. In other words, is it the case that some speakers use mostly affricates and others mostly unaffricated variants? Are speakers stable in their preferred variants across tokens? To test this, we used the same procedure as in the previous experiment, but recruited 6 female and 3 male speakers aged 19 to 30. We aimed to collect 10 tokens of 18 words from each participant, although some trials had to be excluded. In addition, we collected ultrasound data to investigate whether speakers' articulations of the different variants were stable, and whether they made a stable categorical distinction between the variants. This table presents the list of stimuli, where the words in red are the excluded stimuli. As in the Corpus study, there was a general preference for unaffricated variants, although not as strong as in the Corpus. Only around 40% of all tokens were produced with an affricate. Interestingly, the variability could not be attributed to any speaker's consistent preference for one variant over the other, and the two processes of affrication and lenition did not pattern together, defying explanations relying on accent locality. There was no correlation between the use of the two local variants by the speakers. On the graph, you can see the proportion of affricated and de-affricated tokens for each participant. Only two speakers produced the velar stop consistently, and all used lenition to a greater or lesser extent. In general, most speakers fell somewhere in the middle, producing some of each variant for both affricates. This variability was not explained by lexical factors, as only 3 out of the 15 word types were always produced with one variant, among them the loanword cake. However, speakers were generally stable across tokens of the same word type, and so even though 7 out of the 9 participants did produce at least one word with more than one variant, this variability did not affect many words. In summary, the second experiment revealed that the affricate variability is not explained by across-speaker differences. Speakers did not use the variants consistently across words, and words were also not stable. Rather, it appeared that each speaker had a preferred variant for each word, and their productions remained mostly stable across tokens of each word. The final part of our study involved examining the ultrasound data to find out whether some of the variability can be explained by unstable articulatory patterns. We have so far analyzed ultrasound data from 5 subjects, 4 females and 1 male. The figures present dynamic plots of tongue surface shape for the 3 out of the 5 subjects who produced both the affricate and the stop variant. Against our predictions, none used the fricative variant. In the 3 subjects, there appears to be a clear articulatory distinction between the 2 variants, and the articulations do not vary significantly within speakers. In contrast, the articulations of the voiced affricate were much more variable. 2 out of the 5 speakers had a 3-way distinction between the glide, the affricate, and the fricative. As visible in the graphs, the articulations also showed significant variability, and there was a large articulatory overlap between the fricative and the affricate variants. The other 3 subjects had a 2-way contrast between the glide and the affricate or the fricative. However, in 2 out of those subjects, the 2 variants were practically indistinguishable in terms of tongue shape, and only 1 subject showed a clear 2-way contrast, although the articulation was also somewhat variable. In conclusion, using 3 different types of data and research methods, we have attempted to provide a detailed characterization of the behavior of Affricates in contemporary Emirati Arabic, to compare it with historical accounts and findings from other dialects. Our results show a contribution of the 3 different factors to the patterns of variability in how affrication and lenition are applied. Firstly, as regards lexical factors, loanword status seems to make words resistant to both processes, as predicted by previous studies. However, it is important to note that loanwords often in time become entrenched and familiar enough to lose that status, as one of the words in our corpus study showed. Affricates in non-borrowings usually varied at least to some degree in both the corpus and the experimental study. In terms of phonological factors, we have confirmed the prediction that back vowels pattern with the MSA variants, k and j. Interestingly, our corpus data failed to confirm the common claim that the vowel E facilitates affrication, although it did appear to facilitate lenition. This may be a sign of a change in the nature of these processes or a particular characteristic of Emirati Arabic. Furthermore, we did not find evidence for an effect of the obligatory contour principle in affrication, and the effect for lenition was strongly mediated by word identity. As regards within-speaker variability, we have found that speakers did not consistently use either variant, but were largely consistent within words. In addition, the voiced affricate variants showed marked articulatory overlap and variability both within and across subjects. Future research should investigate the interactions between the lexical, phonological, and articulatory factors, as well as the effects of sociolinguistic factors, which could not be addressed in this study. It also remains to be seen whether the instability apparent in our data and the discrepancies with previous findings signify an ongoing change in the two processes. Thank you for watching my talk, and I look forward to answering any questions in the Q&A session.